Hey, friend, you're watching Behind the Scene Divine Intimacy Radio. We're talking about we're doing part 3 show of Uniformity with God's Will, and we're just going to jump in. On your mark, get set, go. This is Dan, Stephanie, and Jordan Burke. Welcome to Divine Intimacy Radio, your radio haven of rest,
your hermitage of the heart,
your monastery of the mind, where we lift our hearts and minds to heaven to navigate the tumult of this very difficult life. And we have an amazing guide to do that today, which is St. Alphonsus Liguori.
And Jordan Burke.
That's right. And we're working through my latest book, which is a reflection on an amazing letter he wrote called Uniformity with God's Will. And if you're following along, we're in chapter 2, Uniformity in All Things. And in this chapter, St. Alphonsus really starts to dig into this question of how do we respond when God moves, either he causes or allows something, can indicate to us how ready we are to follow his will, and can reveal how weak that readiness is or how strong it is. And then when it's revealed that it's weak, we have this beautiful moment of encounter where we can either sort of fight the junk in us to deal with conforming, or we can yield to our own sinful, which is usually what it is, response or frustrated response. So I'm curious, what I'd like to hear from both of you, is there an example in your life, more recent the better, because you've been working for a while, but it'd be good for people to, or maybe in the past, and maybe some contrasts, where there was a circumstance that initially caused you to really be frustrated or angry or whatever the negative emotions are, meaning you're resisting his will. You realized it in the moment because of this what we're studying, and then you were able to recover. So I don't know, either one's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of examples, but okay. I don't know. I don't know which ones I can tell. Some of them are very personal. I think, recently I mentioned in the show previous to this one, the second show, that I gave a talk this weekend, and originally I didn't want to do it, and that's just kind of my demeanor. Whenever someone they're like, "Can you come on a podcast?" I'm like, "Sure, I guess." just I'd rather be in a cave somewhere, right? But so there's that struggle, but then in that, recognizing that that's something that God is calling me to, and to resist is to be like Jonah, who probably will be close friends in heaven if I ever make it there. But in the midst of trying to write that talk, so saying yes to God's will in that sense and saying, yes, I will do this talk, there was still a lot of internal struggle to the point where I couldn't write anything. I couldn't think. I mean, I was banging my head. I talked to you all about it. I was just banging my head against the wall for an entire day.
You mean the Lord was asking you to do the harder thing?
Right, I know, yeah. Imagine that.
Instagram page.
Yeah. And
shameless plug.
Yeah. And
do the harder thing.
It was interesting because it's once I say yes, it's generally very easy for me to just write something out. In this case, it was extraordinarily difficult, and I was just struggling with it. And in that, and I'm resisting the struggle too. I'm frustrated that I'm struggling. I'm frustrated that I can't think of something. I'm frustrated that I'm not, like, God, why aren't you giving me inspiration? Whatever these things are, right? So it's a lot of internal just wrestling, until I kind of realized, oh, you're wrestling because God wants you to wrestle. Mm-hmm. You're wrestling because what he wants you to talk about is something that you've struggled with for a long time, and you need to experience this feeling of wrestling so that you can articulate it. You need to be brought. So my spiritual director, as an example, better example, it's easier to articulate this way. When I was giving talks on pornography, overcoming that, I told him, every time I'm about to give one of these talks, the week prior, I'm in an extreme desolation for an entire week prior to these talks. And he said, Jordan, God is taking you to the valley so that you can remember how you felt and where you were, so that you can lead these guys out. Mm-hmm. That desolation is a gift. Mm-hmm. And that's, for me, recognizing, unifying myself with God's will, and realizing you're permitting me to feel this desolation for a purpose that you have deigned me to experience, or some outcome that you want from this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you've got a big one.
Oh, Lord, which ones?
Right.
Like, which ones are you alluding to? I have a list.
Mama, and the challenges in the family, and
oh, Lord, have mercy.
Yeah.
It's so painful. Yeah. So, I mean, I know a lot of families are dealing with this struggle. my mom has been diagnosed with dementia. She's had it for years, and she took a really hard turn south. It just went really recently, And so I've got my dad, who through a fall ended up having to have brain surgery for a brain bleed. He's 86. He's my deacon dad, my stepdad, but he's been
good man.
He's been my dad for years and years and years. They have, I don't know, 40, 50 year marriage, 40 years, something like
just
that.
Beautiful people.
Yeah. And then, and he's caring for my mom. So he's 86, she's 83. And I went to see them, and I stayed for 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks there to try to help out, because they're staying at my eldest stepsister's house, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate all this, how to serve them. Dad's going to therapy. Mom is struggling like crazy. And, I'm watching all this happen, and I knew I had to leave because I'm married. I have a husband. There's a ministry. There are souls that are waiting to go through deliverance, and my spiritual directees and all of that. Like the Lord is saying, I've called you to something. I need you to go home. And this is something it's going to be really hard to stomach for a lot of people. But I was struggling because I thought, I don't know what's going to how my mom's going to be when I leave. I didn't want to cause her more suffering. I didn't want her to say, where's Steph, and be languishing and then go even worse south, because she would get very agitated, upset, disoriented, paranoia, all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah, just pain. She's just suffering.
Just terrible pain.
It's heartbreaking.
And it's a hard struggle. She's got a fiery spirit, makes it all the harder, I think. And so I'm languishing in this, but I haven't articulated it to anybody. And I'm just staying faithful to my prayer, and I'm just laying everything at the feet of the Lord. But this is ruminating in my head. I'm worried about how she's going to react. I get up the next day, the day before I'm supposed to leave, and I walk into the kitchen, and she turns and she looks at me and she says, "Hey, when did you get here?" And I had been there for weeks. That was the only day that she did that. And it was like the Lord saying, follow my will. Follow my will. And the day I left, which was the next day, and he was comforting me, letting me be detached with that. The next day I get up, and you know what the scripture verse is?
What?
And he who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God. I'm reading this as I'm flying away at 6 a.m. in the morning. I left in the dark.
Weeping.
I was weeping. I was grieving.
Because you wanted to, above all, you wanted to be with her.
I wanted to be the one who cared for her, protected her, consoled her, took care of her bodily.
But God hasn't given that to you.
He hasn't.
Because she's in Texas.
He hasn't given it to me.
Yeah.
But he's given me a heart of love and sacrifice.
Yeah.
And so following God's will versus my will was leaving and going back to what he asked of me, not what I wanted to do.
And it even brings tears now.
It does. It's such a struggle. But you know what? I know that he's working in this, and he's sanctifying the rest of my family. He's working in and through this pain and this struggle. And even, I know this is part of my mom's purgation.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just excruciatingly painful. Not.
And especially they're also, the whole family is just beautiful, wonderful people.
Yeah.
I mean, and especially Elise and Howard.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to watch the pain. You know?
Yeah. But so often that giving my heart completely over to the Lord, to say, I'm going to go where you lead me. I'm going to do what you ask of me.
And you got to take care of Mama.
And I've got to, and I have to surrender my mom to him. And he's letting me know, I've got her. She's not going to suffer more because you're not standing by her side. I'm in control of this. Let go.
Well, that's how complicated this topic is. And that's a perfect example, because at this point, you have listened to God's will so far in your life, or you've come so far in your life, that you recognize God has called me to do X, Y, Z. I have these things, these ministries, these other things, aside from the state in life things that we have to answer to. And you even have to balance that out when people
Mhm.
are understanding, well, how do I do God's will? It's like, well, I want to fulfill the commandment of honor your parents. But in this case, you are, right? And that's really hard for people to understand.
Yeah.
You are honoring your parents by doing this because you are supposed to be doing what you're supposed to be doing. And God's doing what he needs to do and wants to do, things that we will not understand until we're with him,
Right.
while we're fulfilling what he has called us to.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many levels to this.
And I have really truly understood that my role, what my part in this is now become sacrifice,
Right.
prayer,
Yep.
every rosary, every mass.
And every time there's a phone call where there needs to be help or
right.
advice,
I'm there.
yeah.
I will
If we
help
gotta
with
go back out,
finances. We're going back at Thanksgiving to go just love and serve the family and check in and see how things are going. But that was a window of time that I was able to carve out to go, and we have to do what the Lord asks us to do.
And is it, maybe this will help people, is it struggling with the feeling of abandoning something else when in reality we're not abandoning, we're putting it on the altar for God to deal with and
Yeah.
trusting
Right.
It's
what
It's
true
he says.
entrusting.
surrender.
that's the difference.
Right.
Yeah, the flesh or the devil would say, to try to bring guilt,
Right.
you're abandoning.
Right.
The truth is you're giving it over to God, because if you look at the sovereign plan of God in this case, we have for years we asked them to come to Alabama. We would build them a place and we would help them, and that wasn't God's will, and so it wasn't given to us. They're in Fort Worth, where we have wonderful people who are caring for them, and that's what God decided.
Right.
We
By
didn't decide
literally
that.
air flighting him out.
Yeah, we
Like
didn't decide it.
forcing the whole thing.
Right.
He didn't just, my parents didn't decide it. We didn't decide. The Lord said, by these circumstances, I'm going to put them here where they're going to be cared over and watched over by family.
And some really good options for their care.
Yeah, wonderful options. And,
I mean,
and
a
state of the art.
world-class, yeah.
World-class medical care. But I think in our flesh, so
Right.
often we want to do what we want to do that feels right to us, and not understand that even in these circumstances, the Lord's at work. Through my mom's suffering, the Lord is transforming and my family.
Yeah, beautiful
It's changing
conversations.
my siblings.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So hard. It's sort
Hard.
of, it's brutal, as we say.
Brutal
Brutal
and beautiful.
when you see what God is doing. So when we get back from the break, we're going to do another example of this with dealing with illness, because Liguori actually brings that up specifically. We'll be right back. On your mark, get set, go. Welcome back. Welcome back to Divine Intimacy Radio. You're with Dan, Stephanie, and Jordan Burke today. We're doubly blessed today to have more of the family to talk through this great subject. We're talking through just highlighting key points in my new book, Finding Peace in the Storm, which is reflections on St. Alphonsus Liguori's Uniformity with God's Will. And I think, frankly, the best antidote. I mean, there's 3 books that we mentioned, but this is one of the 3 best books out, available on understanding difficult times, understanding how do I find peace, how do I find God's will, how do I bring myself in conformity. So on page 27, St. Alphonsus says, further, we must unite ourselves with God's will, not only in things that come to us directly from his hands, such as sickness, desolation, poverty, and death of relatives, but likewise those we suffer from others. For example, contempt, injustice, loss of reputation, temporal goods, and all kinds of persecutions. On these occasions, we must remember that while God does not will the sin, he does will our humiliation and our poverty and our mortification, as the case may be.
Yeah. So I have a great example here. A loved one. I won't say who it is. There were a number of layoffs at work. And as we were in discussion, there was a huge amount of need for the income that was coming in, right? And you could kind of see it on the horizon. The economy's been pretty bad. And so there was one layoff, and I said, it's coming. It's coming. The layoff's coming because your position in this organization isn't crucial, and they just haven't figured it out yet because they're struggling financially or whatever it is, right? Cutbacks, it's the economy.
And to be clear, this is not our organization.
No. It was
just so people are like, why are they talking about this?
It was a loved one
Yeah.
who was working for an organization, and the layoff came. And then there was one layoff, there was a second layoff, and then I get the call. I lost my job like that. No severance, no nothing, overnight. And all of a sudden, no backup plan, no resources, because when you're living in a real way, not irresponsibly, but paycheck to paycheck,
because they're young,
then that's a real burden.
Right.
And, I immediately called and I said, get yourself to church first. This is a huge storm, after, all the outbursts of word, the string of words, all this stuff, right? Okay, now let's get to church. Go sit at church. Just be in God's presence and put it at his feet and surrender it and come to a place of peace before you do anything else. Right. And what's most important, guard your heart from any kind of bitterness, doubt, despair, narcissism, anything that's going to take you the wrong direction. Because when we come to those storms, the temptation is, we do go into desolation, and then we run, and the enemy runs with it and can really wreck us, can turn us into bitter, angry, frustrated people that we all know out in the world, that we see all over the place, right? But in that moment, it was no, surrender to this, surrender to him. And then you get up and do the next right thing.
Right.
And God be praised through that trial, tremendous graces, a month of every day, surrender prayer application, holding together, keeping eyes on.
Got a great job.
Got a job that far outweighed the other, fully remote, and is enabling them to do the other things that they want to do.
It doesn't always work out that way.
It doesn't, but in this case, it did. It did out of trust and faith.
Yeah. So, did you have something, Jordan?
No, I mean, just more often than not, though, that's what happens when you surrender to God, because you've given what he wants, which is, it's saying, in this tough circumstance, whatever the situation may be, whatever hardship may be, Lord, your will be done. It's Jesus in the garden, right? Let this cup pass from me, but your will be done.
Yeah.
And in that, there's tremendous graces that come from it.
Well, it's a real understanding that God is sovereign.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing that the enemy wants us to forget.
Yeah.
Oh, God's not in this.
He's not.
Where is God?
He's napping.
Where was God in your
He
storms?
went on vacation. He's in the Bahamas.
That's not true.
He's paying attention to Maggie.
He's allowed this.
The producer.
He's either willed it or he's allowed it in order to bring about a greater good.
So another example, I just want to just give real examples. The first show in this series, this is is this the third show? So I could barely talk, and my vocal cords were inflamed, my lungs were inflamed. I was really struggling. So since then, I've been on a path of recovery, and I've been tapering down medications that make me feel terrible. And obviously I can talk way better and all of that. And I thought, okay, I'm out of the woods and I'm going to be fine. 2 days ago, wrong. And I started to go backwards again. And there was a moment, because I lost a lot of sleep the couple of nights, because I'm coughing, I can't breathe, I can't lay flat and all of this. And there are moments in there, and even now, like right as I'm talking, there's a little bit of darkness, a little bit of desolation trying to creep in, because I hate the medication, I hate the way it makes me feel. It helps me not to die, which is good, but I don't like it. But I was up in the chapel yesterday, and just a theme that the Lord has been reminding me. I was looking at him on the crucifix, and he just reminded me again, I couldn't breathe, and I'm having trouble breathing. And so I'm like, okay, I'm with you, and I'm sorry for your suffering, because you couldn't breathe because of my sin and the sins of the whole world that were laid on you. And so I get the gift again. It's not as severe as it was, but I have a gift. And even now my lungs are rattling as I'm speaking. But I get this gift of being able to be more intimate with Jesus, more united with him in his suffering, to offer it up. And we have the marriage retreat coming. We have all of this. And so even when you are down, let's say, which I am a little bit, even when you're in desolation, you can still choose to conform to his will. Yeah. And you can say, in spite of how I feel. And by the way, I offer up how crummy I feel. If it's irritation, if it's sadness, for me, it's weariness, just like, how long am I going to fight this thing? It's been months now.
When is this going to end?
When is it going to end?
Right.
But what happened to me in that moment in particular is it allowed me to rejoice. And it's a weird kind of rejoicing. It's not a rejoicing like, hey, yippee-ki-yay, isn't this wonderful? I can't breathe and things weren't getting, it's not like that. Not this weird kind of goofy, false thing. It is a deeper kind of rejoicing. It's a gratitude because, I get to know him in ways that people who have never had severe lung disease get to know him, because that's a unique kind of suffering that he experienced. And that's a gift. And I'm grateful for that gift because I know what to do with it. I know how to offer it up. And then there's this progression of cooperation in this whole thing. Like in all of these circumstances, there's maybe okay, I accept this. That's good.
There's merit there.
It's better than fighting, or it's a, yes, this is good. This is another deeper level, right? And then there's another one, which is, yes, I need this. I embrace this.
I understand it's your will.
Yeah. And then there's another one, which is, yes, now I'm going to fully cooperate with it. So it's a, it would be one thing to just accept the suffering. It's another to say, I offer it up, which is joining with him. It's another to say, I want it if it's your will.
Mm-hmm. And most people, just to be perfectly clear, are going to have to start with that act of the will that says, okay, I accept this.
The early one. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I mean, that's just where it starts. It's the same thing with forgiveness. You have to choose to forgive someone, even if you don't feel like it.
Right.
You have to make that act of the will. It's the same thing with unifying your will to God's will, and on a deeper level. You have to, if you're starting there, that's fine. There's merit there.
Yeah.
But eventually, as you said, there's deeper levels of commitment and deeper levels of relationship that will come as a result of you subjugating your will to what you know is right and true.
Over and over and over again. Right. The more you do it, the more you enter more deeply into it, the more you draw near to him in it, the more you cooperate in it, the more you become an instrument
right
of his grace.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's okay, but I'd like to make give an example of a married couple.
Sure.
And what this looks like. So so many couples, they enter into a marriage. It's he smells good. He was the cutest guy. He's the one who pursued me.
You're talking about me.
We got whatever, right? For all the wrong reasons. Right. You end up married to somebody.
Oh, I guess not.
And you find and when you got married, you were kind of both off the rails, and then the Lord breaks through. Normally he breaks through childbearing.
Mm-hmm.
And more often than not, it's not all the time, but a heavy percentage of women convert before men. Like it's the suffering, it's the appreciation of childbirth and being able to cooperate in this. It's so miraculous and incredible to carry a child and then have this baby placed in your arms, and it just changes you. You're never the same when you've carried and had a child. And so the Lord uses that and he rushes upon you, right? And a lot of women, that's the beginning of their conversion. So then the Lord's rushing upon them, and all of a sudden they're not the same woman that the guy married, and he's going like, what happened to my wife? And he's not on board with the faith, but she is, right? And that's a whole nother level of suffering, right? And so you've got this pain and this dis-ease in the marriage. The wife's being called, the husband is being called, but he doesn't recognize it. He's not cooperating. And so there's that pain and discord of my marriage is falling apart. It's painful. I don't feel connected to my husband. He's not with me. And this can also be husbands with their wives, because I know a couple of examples of crazy conversions of guys, and their wives didn't come along with them. And so that pain and their suffering has caused them to distress. So that's another place where that uniformity with God's will, with giving into his divine will, is so very important, because you have to take that suffering and you offer it to the Lord for the sake of your spouse, for the sake of the unity of your marriage. And you have to get beyond the anger, the disappointment, the frustration to turn it into a life-giving suffering that's united to the will of God, because he's sovereign. He's allowing this to happen, and hopefully he will bring it to its fruition.
And as we're about to close, you may be the only person who's going to pray and sacrifice for them.
That's right.
And your prayers in that case, because it's for forgiveness and your own suffering, are way more powerful than any prayers that anyone can offer.
Praying
that
for
person.
the person that's persecuting you or breaking your heart is the most powerful prayer.
Yep.
Okay, so until next time, may the God of peace make you perfect in holiness. May he preserve you whole and entire, spirit, soul, and body, irreproachable at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.